Wow, David, you guys amaze me. It's knowing even the tiniest bit of what you do, it just stuns me. So thank you everybody for being here today and joining us in this spiritual community. And it's fair to say that we're pretty much all sitting in limbo as we try to figure out how to adjust our lives and our reactions and our responses in this most unusual, occasionally very difficult, and quite unpredictable time in the world, and in our own unique individual experiences. So I want to ask you to just sit back for a second and take a breath. We're not going to go back into Shelley's meditation, but and let me draw your attention back to this month's book, Rosamund and Benjamin Zander's Art of Possibility. It's essentially about reframing whatever our experience is in life and focusing on purpose, what's actually possible. This seems like an incredibly useful place to work from right now. Last week, at the end of the talk, I finished up by introducing rule number 6, which is don't take yourself so seriously. Another way to say this, that's probably more accurate, is don't take your opinions of yourself or others quite so seriously, or even simply just lighten up. That has a very different flavor, doesn't it? In yesterday's morning practice that Maria mentioned in her host language, we read from The Science of Mind, page 487, starting with paragraph number 4. Dr. Holmes reframes one of the teachings from the Christian New Testament. The source of this particular teaching was written by the Apostle Paul to the church at Rome. Dr. Holmes wrote, "Now it's high time to awake out of sleep. A belief in life apart from good is a dream from which we must awake if we are to taste the waters of reality, which flow from the source of life. As one awakes from a nightmare, so the mentality awakes from a dream of a living death to a realization of eternal life. We cast off the works of darkness when we realize that evil is not an entity, but in fact a fraud. This awakening is a process of evolution, a little here, a little there, until the eye is opened and we see that life is neither separate from God nor different from good. Life is God, and good is the only power there is or can be. When our world seems out of control, like it does right now a lot, at least according to our very fixed and finite point of view, it can be challenging to remember that life is not separate from God or different from good, and that good is the only power there is. We get so many opportunities to loosen our grip on what we think life is supposed to look like, and we can make ourselves crazy in trying to demand that life should behave itself exactly according to our idea of how it should be. Remember rule number 6. This past Thursday evening, we had our monthly Board of Trustees meeting, and simultaneously, parts of Tucson also had a very powerful monsoon storm. It was a board meeting unlike any I have ever experienced. 2 board members were late arriving to the Zoom meeting for very legitimate reasons. And about halfway through the board meeting, my power went out, which meant my internet went down. And I went looking for candles and matches, expecting the power to come back up in a few minutes because it usually does. In this particular case, it was down for a couple of hours. And fortunately, because Zoom has adjusted their protocols, when I dropped out of the Zoom meeting, because of power going out, the position of host transferred to somebody else, and the board continued to meet. They knew I would reappear when I could. And when they had handled everything they could without me being there, they called and patched me in on a speakerphone. And we finished the board meeting. You know, sometimes you just got to make it up. Could I have gotten upset? Oh, yeah. We had a lot of very important and time-critical topics that we were talking about Thursday night. Would it have made even the tiniest bit of beneficial difference for me to be upset? No, not even a speck. One of the ideas in the Rule Number 6 chapter that I especially appreciate is their distinction between the calculating self and the centered self. The calculating self is the part of us that's always figuring, always worrying, always comparing, always a little bit anxious or afraid, because if things don't work out the way we want them to or need them to, then we'll feel less than, we'll feel diminished, we'll feel unsafe, or we'll feel unloved. By any chance, is this characteristic familiar to anyone? I'm going to imagine that I can hear giggles. This calculating self lives in the world of not enoughness, of scarcity, of lack, and of limitation. The calculating self at the core is worried about survival, and it's terrified of change that it doesn't create. The calculating self is the part of us that gets easily activated when we go to the grocery store and can't find toilet paper, or our favorite brand is gone. So the instruction for Rule 6, lighten up, is specifically for this aspect of us, our calculating self. Hopefully, if we think of it, it causes us to stop and ask the question, is the fact that I have to buy Angel Soft instead of Ultra Charmin going to ruin my life? No, it's not. And please don't bring me any toilet paper. I have plenty. And I've discovered some new brands that are actually quite okay. So we get to rethink what's important and what's critical and what has to be managed for our own sense of well-being in our lives. One of the stories the Zanders tell in their book is about a very proud, gifted, and serious tenor by the name of Jeffrey, who was slated to sing this heart-wrenching, melancholy, sad, depressing, yearning song from a vocal piece by Schubert. Jeffrey had a beautiful voice, and he was technically magnificent. So he sang the song with technical perfection and without a single trace of the melancholy necessary to deliver the song with the emotional impact it needed. So Benjamin asked Jeffrey if he was willing to be coached. And being a good singer, he said he'd be delighted without having a single clue of what was coming. Benjamin wrote, "For 45 minutes I engaged in a battle royale, not with Jeffrey, but with his pride, with his vocal training, his need to look good, and all the years of applause he had received for his extraordinary voice. As each layer was peeled away and he got closer and closer to the raw vulnerability of Schubert's distraught lover, his voice lost all of its patina and began to reveal the human soul beneath." Benjamin continues along in the story, whenever someone gives up their pride, gives up their polish, to reveal a truth to others, we always find it incredibly moving. When we show our true selves, not some cardboard cutout of us or some facade that we have created to look acceptable, we show up as we authentically are, zits, wrinkles, mediocre haircuts, whatever. Our magnificence is revealed. Zander finishes this section by writing, "When one person peels away layers of opinion, entitlement, pride, inflated self-description, others instantly feel the connection. And as one person has the grace to practice rule number 6, others feel comfortable following suit. With the calculating self revealed and softened, the central self is available to shine through. Doesn't that remind you of the Marianne Williamson quote of giving yourself permission to shine, which gives other people permission to shine? This has been a very long way to get around to answering the question I posed in today's talk title. How do we live in a world of connectedness, of inclusivity and belonging? What would that look like? What would that look like for you? And how would it feel? How do we show up authentically as our awakened and divine selves, our central self, our connected self? I want to circle back to today's spiritual thought that Shelley read from Dr. Ernest Holmes from the book The Art of Life, page 85, paragraph 5. Take time frequently to become still in your thought and let the barriers of your personality slip away into space. Think of yourself as one with the whole. At first, you will feel a sense of separation, but gradually there will come a sense of being merged with something bigger, something more universal. You will not be less yourself, you will be more, infinitely more yourself. Try to feel that there is no barrier between you and this great it. And I want to continue with the thread from the remainder of the reading that we did on Friday that I started a few minutes ago from The Science of Mind, page 488. To awaken oneself is to be healed, made prosperous, happy, and satisfied. To be made every whit whole, or really to recognize that we already are whole. To be complete, to feel complete, as we were intended to be. God is a God of the living, not of the dead. It sees and knows only perfection and completion, happiness and satisfaction. When we think of ourselves as God knows us, then complete salvation has already come to us. So what does it take for us to wake up to our own true nature? What does it take for us to wake up and experience and express our authentic selves? What does it take for each of us to live from the wholeness that we already are? That's the really big question, isn't it? It's so easy to put up that cardboard cutout and pretend. Well, Science of Mind, page 33, paragraphs 2 and 3 have some suggestions. First, nature seems to await our comprehension of her, and since she is governed by immutable laws, the ignorance of which excuses no one from their effects, the bondage of humanity must be the result of our ignorance of the true nature of reality. The piece that Shelley read as part of the meditation practice today really talked about accepting and owning and realizing we get to work with the law. We get to choose how to engage with this thing that operates immutably and runs us when we're not paying attention, especially. So the rest of that quote from page 33, paragraph 3, that will be familiar to many of you. It's an old friend, I think, some days. When we learn to trust the universe, we shall be happy, prosperous, and well. We must learn to come under that divine government and accept the fact that nature's table is ever filled. So what does it mean to you to come under that divine government? I'm certainly not interested in having anybody tell me what to do or how I should think or how it's like, no, that's none of your business. What does it mean to align with the divine government? What does it mean to align with the way things work? There are some clues further down the page. On page 33, paragraph 4. There is that within every individual which partakes of the nature of universal wholeness, and insofar as it operates, is divine. That is the meaning of the word Emmanuel. That is the meaning of the word Christ. There is that within us which partakes of the nature of the divine being. And since it partakes of the nature of the divine being, we are divine. Not someday, not somehow, not when we're good enough, not when we're perfect, quote unquote perfect. Now, we are already divine. We forget, we get confused. So much of the world, so much of the feedback we get from our engagement with the world helps us forget, helps us not remember we are already whole. So as terrifying or invigorating as this truth may be, depending on your point of view, each of us is already divine, and there's nothing we can do to mess that up. And we've forgotten it, or we've bought into the stories of our smallness, or that we shouldn't think too much of ourselves, or that it's safer if we're small and inconsequential, or whatever particular story is running today. There are lots of them to pick from. So what does it mean to be divine? Or what does it not mean? It doesn't mean to be somber, serious, or uptight. Remember rule number 6. It certainly doesn't mean we hide behind some made-up, just so image of perfection that we've bought into or that society's trying to sell us. One of the things I adore in the morning practice is that people show up any way they are. And if they feel like they're too grody looking, they don't show their picture. And it doesn't matter. Whoever shows up, however they show up, is completely and totally accepted just exactly as they are. And one of the gifts that has come out of COVID, as far as I'm concerned, is that there's a whole lot less pretense and a whole lot less show. And I think that's really good. And I've also noticed that sometimes it's actually easier to get into a deeper conversation about what's truly important, because individuals feel more comfortable and at ease in their own personal spaces. It's one of the reasons I'm so delighted that class attendance is strong right now. Keith's 12 Steps to a Compassionate Life either ended yesterday or it ends next week. And his The Art of Life starts up in mid-September. I hope you will take advantage of this amazing book and this amazing book study that he's doing. And Prosperity Plus 3 starts online in mid-September. If you want to do that, it's great material. Pat and friends will be running it. And then after Power of Your Word finishes, I'm thinking about offering an 8-week visioning series. It's not that hard to do classes online. And we're figuring it out a little more every single time. And maybe, just maybe, we'll do a Wednesday night drop-in book study on September's book, Barbara Marx Hubbard's Emergence. I'll put a link to that on the website so you can respond and order the book on Amazon or Kindle or whatever. It's not brand new material, but it's certainly appropriate and applicable. And we could all use a little support in becoming this divine being that we already are. So how do we remember our wholeness? I suppose for some lucky folks, they can just know. But for most of us, it takes a little work. We practice, we read, we study, we meditate, we reflect on what we've read and think about it, and then decide what we think we know. We pay attention to our lives and how we live them and what happens. And we look and we see what happens, and then we decide whether or not to make adjustments, whether our life is working for us or not. And we remind ourselves again and again and again. And we remind each other kindly, gently, by engaging and practicing together. Zander again. Our central self knows that not belonging and being insufficient are thoughts both native to us and illusory as the idea of Santa Claus. Our central self understands that the threatening aspects that we encounter are often illusions that do not bear taking seriously. Our central self knows that human beings are social animals. We move in a dance with each other, and we are all fundamentally immeasurable, and we all belong. What freedom! Unencumbered by the obstacles that the calculating self makes up and tackles daily, our central self can listen in innocence for who we truly are, listen for the whole of it, and inquire into what's there. The calculating self will never hear the whispers of compassion between people in a busy street or a Zoom call. It's too busy attending to its comparisons and schemes. The central self is open and aware because it needs only to be the unique voice that it is, an expression that transcends its personality. So in closing, I'll mention one more practice from the Art of Possibility, which is the practice of enrollment, participation. This is something we can do for ourselves and for others. Enrollment is the art and practice of generating a spark of possibility. I spoke last week about the coach who gave me the spark of possibility that I could actually successfully drive a car when he told me about this once upon a time novel technology called visualization. We enroll ourselves and others all the time in success or failure by the stories we tell, by the emotions we share, and how we view the world. Those of you who read my article on last week's newsletter, which is now posted on the blog, know the cattail brown paint story, at least as far as it went last week. Now I'll tell you the next part. The background was that the handyman got the paint for my front porch covering following the guidance we had from the Homeowners Association. It turned out we had bad data, so the paint color was wrong, and the handyman wasn't able to do the work he set out to do. He left early, somewhat dejected, and I had a week to figure out what the right formula was for the right paint color. And it looked to me, to my untrained eyes, because I don't know paint, right, that the paint store could just add a few more drops of gold and black to the gallons of paint I already had, because I had the formulas for both. And then it would match and we'd be fine, we could go on. So I called the paint store and I asked them if they could do that. And the fellow said, yeah, bring it over and we'll see what's possible. So I did, holding the 2 cans of paint and clutching the right formula. He looked at what was needed and the formula that had been bought before and the new formula and decided it was simpler to just make up 2 new gallons with the right formulation. When I called the handyman to let him know I had the right paint, he said, how did you do that? And I said, I don't know, I asked nicely. Truthfully and without really intending to, I had enrolled the guy at the paint store in creating a success. And so then I went back and got more paint for another job that I was doing from him, rather than the paint store that I had used previously. So I enrolled him, he enrolled me, and that's how the cycle works. From Zander, one last thing. Our universe is alive with sparks. We have at our fingertips an infinite capacity to light a spark of possibility. Passion, rather than fear, is the igniting force. Abundance, rather than scarcity, is the context. The practice of enrollment is about giving yourself as a possibility to others and being ready in turn to catch their spark. It's about playing together in a field of light. And then a short piece by Rumi, translated by Andrew Harvey. I am the life of life. I am the cat, the stone, no one. I have thrown out duality like an old dish rag. I see and know all times and all worlds as one, always one. So what do I have to do to get you to admit who is speaking? Admit it and change everything. This is your own voice echoing off the walls of God. Own your own true voice, the one that is your true self, your centered self, the one that already knows its own oneness with the divine nature, in the divine nature, as the divine nature. Do that. Bless yourself and bless us all. Thank you. So take a breath and join with me and hold that imagination of your divine self, your expression of that divine nature in you as you, no matter what happens, no matter what goes sideways, what is unexpected, what is out of round. Right now, today, this week, hold on to that image of your divine self as I speak the words. I remember that one life, that whole and holy presence, that power, that love and that peace, that spin the planets, cause the rain to fall, and operate my heart and move the blood in my veins and arteries and cells. That operation of the universe, that thing we call law, that works immutably without error. And I recognize as I align with my truth, my awareness of love and peace and joy, I live on the positive side of that law. And I have uplifting experiences, partly because I decide they are, and partly because things do work out better. It's amazing how that happens. So I remind myself to go there. I remind myself to look at that possibility, to live in that space of, I know there is a way, what is it? Because the law says yes to whatever demand I make with it when I am aligned with good. So I intentionally align with good. And I know that for myself and for each beloved on this call, as each aligns with good, more good blossoms. So celebrating this great awareness, knowing the peace and power and ease and love and light and joy that shows up, and the freedom that comes from living a life that works. I celebrate this awareness. I celebrate this opportunity to practice. I celebrate this opportunity to engage and to be involved in a beneficial way in this joyous thing called life. I feel so grateful to know these words as true. I feel so grateful to recognize this truth that lives as each one who chooses to practice them. And I celebrate the joy of life in great good, light, life, and joy. I relax, I allow, I accept, and I let it be. And so it is.